brother's story.
Correct.
And so his name, kind of, where you guys were born, where you were raised, that kind of background first.
Okay.
So just go ahead.
So my name is Dick Ford. I was born in Spokane, Washington in September 21st, 1947. My brother was 14 months older than me, so this is David Michael Ford's story. He was born in Newport, Washington, July 23rd, 1946.
Okay.
We travel around as young kids, and it's a little bit part of the story as well, because my father was a World War II vet, and his stories were kept inside his head, and he didn't talk to us much about them, but they affected him drastically enough that he couldn't be a good family member and stick around the house. So he left when I was 3, and his effect on our family and on my brother and myself were quite different. And so the story I'm going to talk about probably initiates with my father and his being a vet and how it affected him coming out of the war. He was in the front lines and the beaches of Normandy and so on, and saw lots of bad things. And when he came home, he never did adapt to the life here, and that had an effect on us as well. So not as bad as him, I don't think. I think we progressed a little bit. So
tell me, what branch of the military was your brother in?
My brother was in the Marines.
Okay.
So the story kind of starts a little bit for people of our age, the baby boomers, right about the time we graduated. He was smarter than me, but yet he didn't attend school as often as he should, and so there was one grade where they held him back, so we ended up graduating together from Kelso High School in 1965. So then, just shortly after that, the draft started. So we all got draft numbers, and if your draft number was low enough, you either looked to do something else, or you were going to get drafted, or in my brother's case, he didn't want to be drafted into the Army. He wanted to have some choices in what he did when he was in the military. He didn't decide to go to college or do anything else, so he knew the military was going to either get him or he was going to get it. So he signed up to be in the Marines in October of 1965. And he went to Camp Pendleton for basic training, and like everybody else, he went in with 2 other guys from this local area at the same time. They kind of went in, on the same bus, and headed to the same camp. And other people around that period, within a few months either way, ended up in the same boot camp that he did. But so some of the locals, so he went to Camp Pendleton and went through the regular basic training like everybody, and then from there, once you're done with that first basic training, then you go off to some sort of specialty, and each person, depending on what they were interested in or what the military wanted them to do, they would go in different directions from there. So they may split up with the people that they entered in with, or the people that they were in boot camp with. The one thing they did a lot of in boot camp was shooting, and there's probably, in Dave's unit, there's probably, I'm guessing, 140 people that are together and in a certain way would be competitive with the shooting. And so they wanted the top shooters, and they wanted to bring everybody up to that top level. But Dave was exceptional. He was by far the best shot in his class. And so for the first time, the Marines decided to put together a sniper unit. So when he came out of boot camp, you might say he was recruited. The sergeants would go around and they would ask people, the other Marines, if they were interested in being a sniper, because they wanted to put together 30 snipers that were going to end up going to Vietnam. They didn't end up getting 30, and of course Dave looked at that as an opportunity to do something that might be different, that he could handle. And so he volunteered right away. He was one of the first volunteers.
Had your brother been familiar with guns? Did you guys grow up hunting, or?
No, there were no guns in the family at that point. I had done a little bit of hunting with my buddies, but I didn't own a rifle. My brother didn't own a rifle.
Just curious.
Yeah, there's a couple things that go into that, I suppose, and a little bit of it's his makeup, you know. His personality was different than mine. I was kind of a nervous, quiet, introverted kid, and he was outgoing, friendly. You didn't have any trouble meeting my brother Dave. He knew everybody, and everybody liked him. On the other hand, you know, he'd give his shirt off his back, but if you backed him into a corner, he'd come out fighting. You know, he would not back down from anything. And he never got nervous with any of those things. And that's part of the reason we graduated together. He did a little too much fighting in junior high and high school. Got into a little bit of trouble. But he was never nervous about it. And like I say, he never started one, but he finished a lot of them. And so that sort of character suited very well for what he was going into. For anybody that was in anything where you were heading to Vietnam, didn't matter what your duties were while you were there, but most kids were scared, afraid. They're going into a jungle. They're 13 hours from home, and you know, none of their friends and classmates are there with them. There's all new buddies and stuff like that. So it was a tough thing for them to go into. Where my brother just looked at it like, hey, we got a job to do, and you know, I can do it. And you know, if I have to pull the trigger, I'll pull the trigger, because it's either them or me. And that's the way he looked at it. So when he did get in the situations where he was out as a sniper, everybody wanted to be with him. He wasn't necessarily looking for a fight, but he wasn't nervous either. They knew they had their best chances if they were with him. And that's a little bit I'll share as a book that was written by one of the snipers. It's actually his partner. So when they come out of sniper school, they get partnered up, and they would stay with that partner. And often when they go into the field, it was just two of them. They got ahead of people, and so there was the two of them going along into places they couldn't record, into places that technically they weren't supposed to be there. You know, into North Vietnam, into Laos, into Cambodia. They went places that nobody knew where they were, and nobody recorded where they'd been. So.
And do you know where he was stationed or where he served in Vietnam? I mean, you said he's been to lots of places, obviously, but where was it? Was he based out of someplace?
Yes. You wouldn't say that there was a particular base, but there was some small communities. The largest town close by would have been Da Nang, and Da Nang is just south of the demilitarized zone. But the book that is here, where his kind of a camp, because they just set up camps, so it'd be like Phu Bai was the one town that he was out of the most. And Phu Bai is probably a small community of maybe 60 to 100 people. Well, when Marines were there, now you've got several thousand people there, and they're in tents, they're not in houses. And so that was probably the most familiar place that he was, which is only a couple miles from the border of North Vietnam, so the DMZ. So that's probably where he was most of the time. And then he was attached to a unit, and that unit would go out into certain battles, but the sniper's job was to cover the perimeters or go out in front of them and search out the enemy and see where they might be hiding. And one of their roles was to try to find the highest ranking officer in the group and eliminate him.
Now, how long did he serve?
He served 2 years there and then 4 years in the reserves when he got home. So a total of 6. But in Vietnam itself, 18 months. So the 2 years, 6 months was going through boot camp and the trainings necessary, and then the 18 months was over there with one little extended vacation. They didn't call them vacations, but we would call them vacations. It was they'd get a chance to go to another country and kind of,
Get
away from it, try to get their minds cleaned up, and get ready to go back.
So, did he talk to you much about it when he came back, or?
That's the interesting thing. Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
I heard that a lot from people who served, that
Mhm.
don't really want to talk about it when they get back.
Yeah, immediately when we came back, I was a student at WSU at the time, and that was the main reason that I didn't end up going to service. I was a pretty good wrestler out of high school, got a scholarship to wrestle at WSU, and I wasn't trying to avoid the draft. I was very interested in my wrestling career in school and wanted to do that. So he came home, and I was still in Pullman at that time, but we ran into each other a lot, and I talked to him a lot. So I know that he wasn't talking to anybody, and my mom verifies that, my sisters verify that. He didn't talk to them. He came home, and when you have to think about them coming home. In that short 2 years, this country changed. He
Very
left.
much.
He left. Everybody had short hair. Of course, his was shorter. And when you put him in the service, to take it all off.
Yeah.
You know, and they wore Levi's and tennis shoes, and he comes back, and there's protesters. Everybody's got long hair. They got bell bottoms. They got colored pants. Well, I think I left off with Dave's funeral. It was, it was a neat thing for me. Even though his life wasn't the same as mine, you know, he didn't end up maybe as successful as I did. To give him a proper burial was really it was a good thing for our family. To be able to give him what he deserved for serving and you know, protecting, and that's what he that's what he went over there for. He was protecting his family, he was protecting his country, and he did a good job. It's, you know, when I look back and get the reminders about, probably, I'm thinking about 10 years ago, I was told about a book that he was in. The book it was written by Dave's partner, a fellow sniper that was over there. His name is Ed Kugler,
Okay.
and the book is called Dead Center. And it's really an interesting book in the sense that he tells enough of the details of their life all the way through boot camp and through the missions, each and every mission that they went out on, and their shooting, the distances they were shooting, and things like that. And it almost, in there, this book was written early enough that the people that were there, he gave them all nicknames. So you aren't going to read my brother's name in there. You have to know what his nickname was to know which one he was in the book. They didn't even tell the town they were from because he just disguised everything. And part of that's because he couldn't pull all those people back together and get the necessary legal documents to use their real names and real locations. And then some of it was to protect them, which was kind of what they all did. They protected each other. But it was a healing process for Ed to write this book. And interesting enough, it has the ending shocked me. I didn't see that coming, as you might say, if you were even a sniper. But I felt like when I was reading the book that I was right there with my brother in these missions that he was doing and seeing the things that he saw. And when he would talk about his personality and the things that they would do and things that my brother would say to him, there wasn't any question in my mind. That was him. That's my brother. Yeah. And as he put it, you know, there wasn't anybody he'd rather be beside in a situation like that than Dave. So at that point, I started getting more curious, you know, and I started thinking, you know, maybe I, you know, haven't done what I need to do to let him know how much I appreciated what he went through. And so we started getting a little bit closer in terms of when I would find him and see him, which he didn't have a home or cell phone or anything like that, so he was
anti-establishment.
He was, to the nth degree, yeah, he was. And he even told me here in his last days that he chose to kind of live in a tent or a motorhome or something different than most people, and it's just the way he was. And part of that was him, and part of that was Vietnam. But I did pull a few things out of him and have a few conversations because I had some information that I could base a question on, you know, and ask him, and so, you know, things, you know, what was it like in this. And the other thing that made it difficult for him when he came back, and doesn't really talk about it in the book. It's just the things that people can get when they're over there. So he didn't know until later on that he had picked up hepatitis C over there.
Wow.
He'd picked up jungle rot over there, and that affected him physically, which led to a lot of the ways and whys that he was what he was, because it was an uncomfortable physical situation for him in his last 20, 30 years when all this really came to fruition and started coming out physically for him. It was a very difficult thing. It was as much dramatic for him as the mental part to healing, because he never did heal from it. It eventually, the hepatitis C eventually got his liver and destroyed his pancreas, and there was not much they could do about that. So he picked up some things over there, not to mention he got shot and some things like that while he was over there. But the book talks about his life over there, and it gave me a chance to see that. And I think that's the biggest thing. Most people, and I think it's almost like a catch-22, because they come home, they don't want to tell these stories, so then people don't know what it was like over there, and so they just think, well, they were down in Mexico, and
They didn't really understand what they went through because they won't really open up.
yeah, and there's nothing here that you can go through that equals that,
No.
and so you can't relate.
Yeah.
I had the same situation at Mount St. Helens. I was a district forester at Mount St. Helens when it blew up. I swear I had a lot of contact with Andre, but I had a small crew working for me, 4 guys, and it happened to be, luckily, only 4 guys on the day that the mountain blew, but up to that, just the Friday before, I probably had 50, at least, contractors out there that all would have been killed. Well, on this small crew, 3 were killed and 1 survived. And his story is the most told story at Mount St. Helens. And the first question, everybody, for 10 years he wouldn't talk to people, but he went through some of the same stuff. And finally, when he did relent to do interviews, first question always is, well, why did you survive? And his response was the same. It's like, I can't really tell you why I survived, and I can't really talk to you about my experiences. The only ones that I could talk to about it are dead.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they could talk to each other.
Sure.
In this case, this guy didn't have anybody to talk to because the 3 that he was with that experienced the same thing he experienced
Yeah.
weren't there to talk to, and so that affected him the rest of his life, and in particular in trying to come out.
Sure.
And so in the Vietnam was the same way.
Sure.
Those guys might get together and do some talking, share some stories, because they're probably from different places. But to come back and talk to somebody that didn't have those experiences, the near-death experiences,
Yeah.
or where they had to shoot somebody,
Yeah.
you can't just walk up on the street and talk to somebody about that, because they can't relate because they don't have the same feelings, they don't share that same experience.
Did your brother ever kind of start to open up eventually, or did he always kind of keep that to himself?
But Dave was a little bit different in the sense that it's kind of his personality being, a really bold and
Right.
basically outgoing person.
Right.
If you ask him, you could get anything out of him. That was the problem I had, and I felt a little bit guilty about that because I didn't ask him. Some of his friends might have. He might have shared some stories with them, but when I finally did open up and talk to him about it, he shared stories with me. He shared a lot of stories with me, but I think I got as much out of the book Dead Center about the day-to-day details, and it might be more than most people want. But for me, it helped. It was a little different because it's my brother, and it was him going through these experiences. So I wanted lots of details, especially since he came back alive. Had he not made it, like some people, I might not have wanted those stories. But,
Right.
but with him, I wanted them because he was home, and I wanted to start being able to talk to him about it and help him if that was possible. Maybe even in a small way help myself.
Yeah. Do you think that you were ultimately able to achieve that at least a little bit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the conversations that I ended up having with him, I'm sure, I felt that that he was finally, you know, after all this time, finally at ease with all of that. And there was 2 other occasions where he had opportunities to kind of come out with it, and it's because my dad and my brother, who were both passed away, were both buried in the same cemetery that he's in, the Willamette National Cemetery down here in Portland. And so, as a family, we went to both of those funerals, and then got together afterwards and had some opportunity to talk about those things. And then, and one of the other things that made it difficult for him is he has 4 kids, but they're kind of scattered, and they don't come together often because they aren't necessarily from the same mother.
Right.
And so, you know, they had that same problem I did. We've talked recently about all of this, and they didn't talk to him much about it either. They were more interested at this point. They weren't alive at the time, and so it didn't mean as much, but they only in their recent time have they realized that maybe they could have had a better relationship with him had they been able to open up. And I had that same experience with my father, because I resented the fact that he left, and so I didn't talk to him, and us kids, we didn't talk to him about war, and he didn't bring it up. But towards the end of his life, he wanted to reach out to us and get to know us a little bit better. So I had maybe 3 or 4 conversations with him, and they were all about war, basically, and how it affected him. And
Interesting to see those patterns repeat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd like to see an end of that pattern, but
Yes. I think we all would see into that.
yeah, at least in some of the more recent wars, there's less and less hand-to-hand combat. So,
And it does seem like they're getting more support.
Mhm.
The soldiers returning are getting more support when they come back. We know that the VA has had its many problems, but at least people seem to be more focused on supporting veterans and
Mhm.
making sure that they're taken care of instead of just sort of keeping them quiet and shutting them up. And
I think it even further, I think there's kind of an underlying interest in some of the things. When you see this recent movie, Sniper, I mean, it's a popular movie. How many people went to see that thing?
Right.
So I think there's an interest in some of that about. I think it was twofold in that sense. I think his life was interesting because it was taken the way it was, and so there was some recent news about that. But before he was shot, there wasn't a lot of interest in what he had done.
Right.
But the people that I've talked to that saw the movie, I think that they did have an interest in it, and I think it opened some eyes as to, you know, what war is like for people, because the majority of people don't go to war.
Let us hope not.
They don't, you
Let's hope
know.
that never comes.
It is a small percentage of the population actually
Yeah.
ends up fighting and protecting the rest of the country. So, you know, we may be supportive of the people that go, but we can't relate the day-to-day details. And in some of those films, I think that's what's interesting to people is that they see those day-to-day details of these guys out and you know, no sleep and you know, very little food and you know, tough conditions and it's a little bit different because I think right now the war that we see a real enemy. You know, we see somebody that, you know, we've now had an attack on our country in our lifetime, and we see that there's somebody responsible for that. And that's the thing with Vietnam. The one thing I talked to my brother about is they didn't really know who the enemy was. Yeah, all you need to do to understand kind of the government's role is dig into a little bit about the rifles that they were sent over there and the ammunition that they were sent to go into those rifles.
Oh, sure.
And you see that was business. That was
Yeah, it was a horrific thing.
yeah, totally unfriendly area in a lot of ways. You knew some of the guys that you just got in with, and you were there day to day, and you were protecting each other. But another kind of a good story is a friend of mine who says he probably won't ever do this. I talked to him last night about this, and he encouraged my story. But but he says he probably won't tell his story. But the one story I'll tell about him, I won't necessarily give you his name, but it's typical of what it was like. So they're over there battling, and they were in the same unit, but my brother's a sniper, so they aren't necessarily together day to day. My brother's out in the flank somewhere doing things, and so they just had a battle, and they'd lost 14. They had 14 casualties, 28 seriously wounded, and they're walking back into Fubai, and you know, he's weary, he's tired, he's going to take a shower or do whatever he could do to catch some Z's or whatever. But so he's walking by, and it was just huts, you know, it's just tin roofed huts, and he hears this, "Hey, Myron," and that's his nickname. And he looks over there, it was my brother. So his story is, he says, I can't even tell you how good that felt to see somebody and hear somebody from my hometown.
That's amazing.
He says, you didn't see anybody.
Yeah.
He was with people. He knew they were there.
Yeah.
And maybe the 18 months he was there, he'd see 4 guys he knew for brief minutes. Maybe a day, maybe they go have beer together or something like that, and then they go off their separate ways and they'd never see them. And so, you know, you feel alone.
Sure.
Man, how could you not feel alone?
I mean, how isolating, you know? You're in a country where you don't really understand the language, people don't understand you. You know, you don't have your support group. I don't want to call it support group, but you know, your friends and family, all the people that support you. You're suddenly in another country. That's a very isolating.
Yeah, there was one other story he told. He said they were in their foxholes, and these foxholes are only about 5 feet deep. They have to dig them themselves, and he's and they're getting bombarded, and you know, he's not sure who's around, so he yells out. He says, "Who's out there?" And he said my brother answered him. He said, "It's me," and this guy knew my brother's voice, so he says, "Is that Dave?" And he says, "Yeah." And he says, "Where you at?" And he says, I'm over here about 50 feet away from you in my hole." And he said that got him through the night.
Wow.
And he said, you know, it's like that. And that's probably the one thing I really want people to understand about my brother, is that you talk about getting through and getting people through. Everybody you'll ever talk to about him, especially over there, that's what they'll tell you. He's the guy they relied on to feel secure, to feel like to build your confidence up that you're going to make it, because he would encourage you. And I won't use the language that he would use, because he wouldn't want to print that. But there's, in this book, you know, I'll have to warn you if you ever read it. It's full of that, but it has a great ending. You know, people would be discouraged, and they would talk negatively, and he'd just say, "I don't want any part of that. You know, you're going to make it. You're going to get through." And then you see those in the movies that you watch. But he was the guy that most people leaned on. You know.
Sounds like an amazing person.
Well, there's just a handful of things here I was going to read, and it's because it not only portrays him a little bit, but it's kind of the guts of a sniper. You know, it's a tough job.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
I wouldn't remember. So the first thing is that they come out of boot camp and they go. Some guys get sent off like construction. One friend I golf with, he went off into construction, so he's in the same area, but he's in a construction crew. You know, he can hear stuff going on, fighting and stuff, but he's not right in the middle of anything. So, but I was in STB, which is Special Training Branch, and life became a real bitch. It made a regular boot camp look like Little League baseball practice. So that's just the camps. They're still in training here in the U.S. To go through that, but you knew that's what you're getting into when you signed up. And most of these people were volunteers. My brother jumped right into it. This guy who wrote the book did not. He was kind of arm twisted.
Oh.
And then this is one of the one thing I probably left out is there's a lot of older guys in Vietnam that have been through some other wars and been through some conflicts. and they were the leaders there. And all the young guys will tell you, you know, if it wasn't for them, even though they were hard on them, they screamed and yelled, but they were prepared. And if they hadn't been there with that experience, there would have been a lot of slaughters. Because when a friend of mine had a friend that was right beside him that got captured and spent 8.5 years in POW camp. Some more guys would have gone off and got lost, got where they shouldn't be, and stuff if it weren't for these older guys. So this is one of the older guys at the training speaking. Says you young men have a chance to make an impact and be part of history. You could come to us and be part of the best. So he's recruiting here. And as the gunny said, it's not for everyone. It's a lonely job. You're working two-man teams alone. The risks are high. You'll be trained in landmine warfare and demolitions. You'll be trained to call in airstrikes and artillery. You'll learn to be self-sufficient, survive in the brush. You'll fight a personal one-on-one war. You have to decide if you think you can handle it.
Wow.
Yeah, when I read that one, it brought back that movie with Jack Nicholson. He's saying you can't handle the truth. But here you say you can't handle the war. Yeah, some of these, this is just his partner, who is Ed Cooper. As partner, Zulu and I, that's his nickname, Zulu, and I were heaven sent, according to him, that's my brother speaking. After my recent pagoda experience, I thought he was a madman, yet I wanted him next to me in the wilds. I could tell by the look in his eyes he'd be there for me. He must have felt the same way about me, or why the hell would he have chosen me? So, this Ed Cooper, when we went into training, he didn't know what was going on, and my brother just walked up to him and says, "What's your name? Where are you from?" You know, Ed Cooper in Pennsylvania. He says, "Come with me, you're my partner." It's just kind of the way it was. There's a couple of marked here, and it's just about done. But
That's okay.
and one's his picture. I got that marked. Some of them I read this morning. I'm not gonna read that one. This kind of brings out a little bit of our thinking earlier about Vietnam, and I'll bleep it. I agree. Technically, the bleep was right. I guess. I mean, coup. This is my brother speaking. It's all a big game, and we're just bit players. Let's have fun and make the most of it. I just went over and told a few old cronies of mine goodbye. Hell, I don't know if I'll be back from the recon deal. And neither do you. So, believe it. Deal with it and have fun, for tomorrow we may die. But
It's hard to imagine living that way. Having to knowing that that's going on in your thought, because that's the situation you're in. It's hard to relate to.
we can imagine if everybody was scared, and everybody, their nerves kept them from doing the right thing, or thinking clearly and making mistakes. If you didn't have a guy like this, they kept you straight and you said, deal with it.
Yeah.
Let's make the best of it and have fun while we can. And a lot of the stories, another one that, there was a third story my buddy told me, and it's worth talking about. He said they'd been on some battles and they were weary and tired, starting to wonder if they would make it back and all those kinds of things. And he said they had just come back from a battle and he heard some hooting and hollering and he looked down over this hill and he saw one other guy and my brother. They had gone out to some little village and bought a pig, and it was Thanksgiving. And he said he looked down over the hill and here's my brother packing a pig up the hill, still alive, strung up on a stick. And he said they cooked that, they were still in the field here, they hadn't actually come back into civilization as they knew it, but so they're still way out in the field. So they cooked this pig and had a big Thanksgiving dinner from this pig they cooked. And this is another example. It was my brother, thinks of those things. He thought, hey, it's Thanksgiving. Let's do something. I know there's a village down there, and I got some money in my pocket. Went down there, and they bought this pig, brought it back, and roasted for everybody, and had a good time for at least one day. They were able to take their mind off the war.